and I can see your screen.
Awesome. So, hello everyone. I'll try to watch the questions as I go. So feel free to interrupt at any point if you have questions, and I'll try to make sure I snag them and answer them on the fly. This is supposed to be more of like a fluid conversation. So a little bit about my background is I work with startups all over the world. And so some of these ideas and practices come from them or ideas that I implement in my own startup. And so today we're going to talk about some of these practices, technologies, and so forth, and then have a conversation about how we can apply them into our libraries, whether that be to improve our patrons or to improve our own organization as a whole. So the joke, I guess, to kind of kick us off is, I just bought a domain for my startup. And so that's usually and things are getting serious, like you come up with the company name, you're building your brand. And so we talk to our patrons about, what are you doing in our maker spaces, for instance, or if we're trying to start a new idea or a new company. These are some of the things that we'll talk about today and how we implement and strategize around them to kind of better our communities. So our agenda today, we're going to talk about team dynamics and how as startup companies and then as well as ourselves build teams, and then at the same time how we should remove bad ideas or slack or whatnot to help kind of increase our efficiencies and focus on efficiencies. And then we're going to switch gears and talk about being efficient with what we do have and how we can look at data in a different way. I think we collect a lot of data about how we interact with our patrons and the frequency of our patrons. So we'll talk about that and then how we can apply those practices to kind of increase efficiencies. And the last section will be just a big list of tech tips or tech tools that we can use either in our library and these are the same tools that startup companies use. So when we talk about our team, there's a whole bunch of really good articles out there and studies that show the importance of reading. I think we can all agree that as librarians, reading is important. But to take it a step farther, reading specific types of material is also crucial to the success of a team. And so what I've seen companies do is they make everyone read the same book. They're like, hey, we're going to read a book about the lean startup, for instance, or guerrilla marketing tactics. And everyone in the organization has to read the book. And then they have actual book discussions, believe it or not, in meetings. And people talk about what they've read. And whether that be, hey, let's improve our marketing for our programs in our library, or let's figure out ways we can be more efficient, or let's figure out our collaboration problem or a communication problem. Let's fix that. And so the leader would choose a book and everyone reads it. At the same time, there's a lot of really good articles online. And I guess as librarians, we should be able to understand the difference between facts and fake news, if you will. So one of the websites I like the most is Medium. It seems really well vetted. The community behind Medium involves everyday readers, and they all comment and what's called a clap, or basically like a Facebook like on articles of people, and you can see people annotating articles together and highlighting what they like and what their feedbacks are. And so it's not only reading the article, but seeing how people respond to it. And so it's one of my favorite tools. And the second favorite tool I like is called Blinkist. It's an app that summarizes an entire book in a 30-second, what's called a 30-second blink or a 20-minute blink. And so it makes life easier from the perspective of if you're not sure what book to read. I've been listening to a ton of blinks, and I'll show you a couple slides. So on the top left is what a Medium post will kind of look like. And on the bottom right is the Blinkist app. So if you wanted to download those apps, they're free. Blinkist is a subscription though. I think I pay like $60 a year, and then I can get summarized content. So I get a ton of reading recommendations every day with the people I work with the startup companies I communicate with. They'll be like, hey, you should read this book because it'll solve this problem. Whether that problem would be time management or dealing with stress or marketing tactics. And I keep a notepad of a whole bunch of books I have to read. Unfortunately, I don't have all the time in the world, so I have to choose wisely. And so what I'll do is I'll actually listen to the blinks. And again, these are about 20 minutes long. You can read and also listen and then download if you're traveling. And basically get a good high-level summary of what the book's about, or at least main takeaways. And if I like those takeaways, I'm like, you know, I'm like really jazzed and I want to hear more and want to read more, I'll actually go out and buy the book or go to the local library and check it out. And it's a really great tool to kind of fast track, you know, your collection of books or what you should get. And again, with Medium, it works really well. So as you're searching for articles and reading articles, whether that be, and there's also a lot of librarians that write articles too. And there's a really good following of librarians writing Medium posts. And then you can read what people are talking about and what their challenges are, and takeaways. And so there's a lot of really good conversations on both sides. And so people in startup worlds actually make this a requirement, like you're supposed to read. And I thought that was a really unique perspective that we kind of forget about. I don't know how many libraries actually force their staff to read a book. And what would our dynamics be if we make people read books about, you know, customer service or dealing with difficult issues and things like that. Also with the team, one of the things that we should always remember, as if we're managers or fellow teammates, is to provide kudos and give feedback and encourage people to continue doing well. And so there's 3 websites I like: Kudos Now, Growbot, and Office Vibe. Growbot is an integration that works with collaboration tools like Team and Slack. I'll show you some slides. So Office Vibe I really like because it will randomly, you can set the threshold like once a week or once a month, send an email to all of your staff and ask them to take a survey. And then there are 5 questions. They're random for every single staff member, and they get asked a bucket of questions. And then based on how they answer them, you get this kind of data back about your organization and how the team's reacting and things you need to focus on and improve. And I've used this tool multiple times with different groups and organizations to find out what our pain points are. And we run this for a few months. We collect a bunch of data, and it's all anonymous. And people like it. The staff that take the surveys enjoy it because they're able to give feedback. And they ask questions in a very unique way. Like, let's say for breakfast, they say that, you know, you should always eat, your first meal of the day should be breakfast. So it doesn't come out and ask, did you eat breakfast today? It'll ask, you know, as part of your morning routine, do you this or that? Like, do you eat? And then you can understand about employees' wellness. Are they taking care of themselves? And they all ask about stress, like, do you go home and do you still work? And they'll ask these questions in sometimes vague ways to find out information about the person, and then how the company can use it to improve. And then you get like even more detail about how people are engaging and how people are working together and what you should do as an owner to fix it. And this is kind of another tool that will let you share kudos in Slack to other members, and you would basically award people prizes. And then in other instances, you can translate prizes into actual, like, digital prizes into actual gifts. So again, a lot of really good ways to bring people, and that builds morale as people come together and want to work and solve problems as a whole. And everyone does love to feel like a pat on their back. The other thing we should consider, as startups do this all the time, is do surveys, and they continually survey their people and the people they work with, vendors, clients, etc., and staff, to find out what's going on, how are we doing, and what can we do to improve. One of my favorite survey sites, I really don't like SurveyMonkey, I don't like Google Forms, I've seen so many of them, like I'm tired of them, and hopefully some of you are too. The newest and latest and greatest is Typeform, and they offer discounts to libraries and educational groups. And it's clean, and it's different, and it's interactive, and it shows you one question at a time. And you can do what's called the logic ladder. So if I was to fill out this survey here, and I said I was under 8, if this was, you know, finding out my favorite drinks, and it says, what is your age? And if I choose under 18, it's not going to ask me any drink questions. It'll ask me a different subset of questions, and you can program all of these logic ladders within Typeform. So how many of us had to take a survey where you said, like, not relevant to a question, but the next 4 questions were about that other question that you said it wasn't relevant to you? Like, do you have a cat? No. What kind of litter do you buy your cat? Well, why would you ask that if you already said no? So Typeform solves that problem and only gives you the questions you need based off your responses. And this is what it looks like on the back end. You drag and drop what you want to ask, And then if you build a logic ladder, it'll basically have a little arrow and then another arrow to where the next question will skip to. But it's drag and drop, and this is one of the surveys I did for ALA. One of the other things we have to remember and kind of think about in the back of our head is, what do we do with the data when we get it? So a lot of people will take surveys and then they look at the data and they're like, oh, people said this, and they leave it alone. And so before you do any kind of surveys, I always tell people to come up with an action plan. And will that action plan state, if everyone says this idea is terrible, what do you do? If your decision is to scrap it, then after the survey, you have to scrap it. Or if it's about to find out about a process that you do, and everyone says, hey, I have a better idea. So what do you do with those answers? And so you always have to act on things, and we can't just like absorb it and then move on. I think I was in a think tank meeting a few weeks ago, and one of the topics that came up is reporting data that we report to the state in terms of circulation, patron count, all of that. And then what do we do with that data? Wouldn't it be interesting to reach, because it's shareable, like everyone knows what everyone else is doing, and reach out to those groups that are having the highest circulation numbers and ask, what do you do? Because there's data in there, and we can find, and if we dig about the data, we can find out what we're doing and how we can improve and do it better. And then one of the most challenging things to do when you talk about your surveys, so people have buy-in to certain projects. You find out that you're just throwing money at something and everyone's saying it's not being used. You have to stop it. And sometimes it's a hard choice to make because we get attached to what we like and what we love. Or at the same time, if only one person's using it out of your 20,000 served, or even 100 people are using it out of your 20,000 served, is that viable? Is that worth it? To switch gears a little bit, when we talk about efficiencies as well, one of the things that I like to think about or play with is scheduling efficiencies. I like data probably too much than a human should, but there's a lot of really good data that we can collect in terms of our patron usage. Like how many people do we see coming in the door, and at what points do we actually need folks, and what points do we not? And so in the startup world, it's usually having very little resources, and those resources having multiple hats, which is very similar to the library world, right? And so what they often do is identify the minimum resource for the optimum efficiency. And to do that, ask questions on each day. How many patrons do you see a day? And then I would take that a step farther and then break that out based off of volume per hour per day. And that way, from Sunday through Saturday, depending on when you're open, you can then start tracking how many people do you see. And then do this over a year or a couple months. And that way you can have some pretty good historical averages. Find out the high points, find out the low points. And then determine, why are those numbers higher and why are those numbers lower? Is it holiday seasons? Is it, I worked at a call center and we found out that when there's Game of Thrones on or Walking Dead, the amount of people that call in for questions decreases because they're watching the TV show. And so there's a lot of really cool data you can start pulling when you're looking at it and you're asking it. So here's how you would do a really simple calc. On the top, that'll tell me how many people I see per average in my library. So on Monday at 9 a.m., I see an average of 9.13 people. And then at 10, I see an average of 10 people. Throughout the day, the highest point of interaction seems to be between 9:30 and 1:30. And I can go on hours and figure out, where do I need people and when do I need it? Then you come up with a number. How many people do you think you need to serve 10 people at once within a half-hour time block? And so if you say 2 people, or you can serve 2 people per that time block, then you can get this set of numbers in the yellow, and that'll tell me how many people I need on the actual hour. Then I can include who I have now, just by punching in how many people are clocked in, and then I can find out the difference by subtracting the 2, and it'll tell me where I need people and where I have too many. And so then you would then ask yourself, what do I do with my overflow? I'm not saying it's time for a massive layoff, but what I am saying is, can we direct those resources to do different projects? We all have action lists. We all have a massive agenda of things to try to accomplish. So could we shift gears and let those people be away off the floor or whatnot, and focus on, mission critical projects and do things that way. And then a tool to make that happen is a tool called shift planning, and it's probably my favorite. And it's now by a company. They changed their name to Humanity, and it's by far the best scheduling tool I've ever seen. And get rid of those Excel charts and use this, and you'll be the happiest person in the world. The way it works is you punch in everyone's shift. Everyone has a login. If they need to request time off, it will then send an email. If you have to fill every shift that's off, it'll send an email to the rest of the staff saying, hey, this person's off. Who wants to fill it as a volunteer or whatnot, or get overtime? And they would check if they want to backfill it. At the same time, let's say that's not an option and people have to trade shifts if they want the day off. Same thing. They would go to the website, choose when they want to trade or who they're trading with, select a button. It'll then message the people that are available for trading shifts and make the trade happen. And there's a boatload of other really cool tools, but that's essentially my favorite parts of it. And again, this is called Humanity. The product's called Shift Planning. So moving, since we're on the people topic, when we're doing projects, sometimes we have to use outsourced resources to get things done even faster efficiency. Not everyone has the skills to do everything you wish. You might not have programmers on staff, you might not have graphic designers, and then to hire one is expensive, especially if it's for a short-term project or a one-off project. And so there's two sites I like a lot. One's called Fiverr, and the other one's called Byron. Oops, I went too fast. So what Fiverr is, it's a website that people can log into and then complete projects for. And so if you're like, I need somebody to help me with my social media, you would go to the social media section, and there's people that'll say, hey, I will run your social media campaign for you for $20 for the month, or I'll design a logo literally for $5. And so if you need quick wins, Fiverr is an affordable resource where people are affordable and they do really good work. Byron, on the other hand, is a tool that lets you hire basically an assistant for $22 an hour, and it's a pool of assistants. So you don't get one, you get a pool, and essentially the way it works is you log into a website, you put your projects together, and then this will reach out to this pool of $22 an hour resources and determine who can do it, and then slide them into a slot, and they work the projects. And so for conferences I present at, I actually been using Byron if I need some quick handouts made, or, oh no, I need to get this done really fast. I'll create a project, put my conditions in or what I need accomplished, and in about 2 to 3 hours, I get a project done. And I don't have to, invest in my time or relearn how to do video editing or whatever it may be. And it's quick and it's easy. And this is what Fiverr looks like. And so a list of options at the bottom there, you choose the one you want, and you basically work on how to make that happen. So these are some more expensive logos, but there's also, again, the $5 logo people in there. So we talked about spending money. Now let's talk about not spending money and collaborating and working together. So the first thing is, when we talk about communication, it's incredibly important for the success of a startup, as well as a library. People always have ideas, people always have to communicate, there's always something going on, and we need to figure out the way to communicate it the most effectively. There's a lot of complaints about email, and I'm pretty sure a lot of us get emails all day and we hate it. And they say that we waste hours of our workday checking email. In fact, we waste so much time checking to see if we have email that actually takes like 2 hours of our day just checking to see if we have email or not, which counts the distraction time of you pausing what you're doing to look at your email box and then to getting refocused on whatever task you were doing. So there's two tools that kind of help simplify that email. Facebook at Work, which I haven't used, but people use it because it's like Facebook. And my very favorite is Slack. There's free and paid plans, and there's also discounts for education, nonprofits, and more. So this is what Slack looks like. You would set up what's called channels on the left, And these would be buckets of information. So instead of sending an email about an annual meeting and then sending an email about designing tests, if I was working on my design test at the time, I would just hang out in the design test Slack channel and get those only as notifications. And so here's kind of how it works, like high level. There's channels and direct messages. Channels, again, are buckets of information. And then you can put groups together and teams together, and you can make those private, where it's only like a group of people working on a specific project, or even doing private messaging where you can message an individual person. And the idea is more channels, not emails. And so here's what I used for Slack when we did ALA with a group of startups. I put a channel together for ALA, I can invite guests to it, and invited my startup friends to join it so we could communicate, collaborate, share resources, share connections. If there was somebody that was really interesting that came by one booth, they would post it in Slack so the rest of the group would know who it is, and so they can go and say hi. With Slack, there is a ton of integrations. So there's a lot of things you can do to connect your existing resources or kind of streamline efforts. And so you can connect things to like ticketing systems. You connect data. You can connect, and I'll show you in a couple slides, you can connect your Twitter tweets or your messages and have it all show up into Slack. You can have email show up into Slack. If there isn't an integration for it, you can actually program one, and it's not difficult to do. And these APIs and email integrations streamline so much effort and to make magic happen. And so you can start building commands and using the built-in functions of Slack and all of its power to do some really amazing things. Like I stated earlier, you can collaborate with outside folks. So if you were working with vendors on a remodel of your library and you were tired of them emailing you and you had to go look in your giant email box to find those emails, invite them into your Slack channel. And that way, when they join, they'll only see that specific channel and nothing else. And then it doesn't cost you extra. If you have a paid plan, a guest or an outside guest is free. So a lot of things you can do with Slack. I use it for emails as well. So if somebody emails me at a specific email address, it will show up in a specific channel. Let's say you wanted to keep track of book requests. You can create an email address. Then using if, then that, you can have that email automatically go to a specific channel to notify the staff of a need or a request of a book. Another app called Smooch will actually link to your Facebook account. And so if people message you on Facebook, you don't have to have a social media person flipping between tabs all day. You're going to have everyone viewing the conversations that are taking place. And the way it works is when it'll ping your Slack channel, create a new channel for it, and then as soon as someone starts messaging it, it will then put a checkbox, like you see in the top left, that somebody has started working with Brian. It also integrates with, again, like Hi Byron, for instance. And so whenever I make projects, I want to check my email. I want to check my Slack because that's where I hang out. And I can get those updates and I can filter it easily. Or even tweets. I don't have to have Twitter notifications open now, which annoy me. I can just look at my Slack channel when I have time and look at my social media feed and see what I need to respond to. And then this is the picture of what a Facebook social workspace would look like. And it mimics very closely on what Facebook looks like now, with a few extra caveats of like it's restricted to the people in your company. So switching gears a tiny bit, now that I bashed email, let's talk about email. There's two great services that are out there, Google Apps and Office 365. Having email as a whole is usually really expensive. You have to pay the server licensing, etc. But in the recent years, that has changed to being hosted by Google, which is only like $5 to $25 a person per month, or Office 365, which starts as low as $4 a month, or $12.50, and you get the Office suite with it. And so Google and Microsoft, most of us are familiar with the offerings they have. So Google Docs, Google Drive, Calendar, their classroom tool, Hangouts, etc., are for Google. And when we talk about Microsoft, they have a little bit more. They have like your typical Office suite. They have what's called Yammer Teams, which competes with Slack, SharePoint sites, etc. But both of these tools work really well. They're quick and easy to set up, and they're cost effective. And so startups will actually use one of these because they don't have an office space yet, or they might not have the infrastructure to support something like this and host it themselves. When we're talking about email, there's a few apps that I really like that make your emails better. And since I use Google Apps, it's kind of biased. So these are the two that I use, Boomerang and Assistant.2. So here's what Boomerang looks like. The idea is if you're scheduling a meeting or working with somebody and you want to make sure we get our responses, Boomerang has a built-in tool that tells us how likely are they going to respond based off of how we interact and what we're asking. If we're too wordy, they're probably not going to respond. If we ask too many questions, they're not going to respond. If it's too difficult to read, they're not going to respond. So it tallies all this to figure out where's the sweet spot to ensure you get a reply. At the bottom, you'll notice that it says send later. And so you can, what's called Boomerang, so you can say, hey, I want you to send this later, or I want you to bring it back to my inbox if I don't hear a reply in X amount of days. And so that way you can kind of keep track of your conversations. How many of us email someone and then we forget we emailed them because they never replied to us, and so we have to email them again. And Assistant.2 makes scheduling meetings a lot easier. The way it'll work is it'll check your calendar first to see when you're available. And then if you're scheduling a meeting with someone, it will copy that, paste it. And then the receiver, all they have to do is click on one of the little circles, and then it locks down a meeting. It'll send the calendar invite out to everybody and streamlines a ton of effort. When we talk about project management, there are a ton of projects that we do all day, every day. And to keep track of that can sometimes be difficult. And so there's 3 great tools that help you with that: Asana, Trello, and Wunderlist. Asana has a really nice screen on it. It looks really clean and it works really well, and it's free up to 15 people. Trello is the site that has all the columns in it, and you basically put your project plans in columns. And then Wunderlist is basically just a list of projects you're trying to do and accomplish, and you can put deadlines on it, and it'll ping you. These also integrate with Slack. So if you're using Slack, you don't have to go check other apps all the time. You can look at your Slack channel with those in it for those updates. When we talk about site hosting, that's another consideration that startups have, as well as ourselves. So when we talk about hosting a website or hosting files and servers or whatnot, the question they have to decide is, do we have the infrastructure in place? Do we have the bandwidth to support people accessing our website? And those kind of questions. And again, if you have questions, feel free to interrupt at any time. I know I'm throwing a lot of data at you or information. The slides are shared as well, so don't feel like you have to write everything down. But it's expensive to host sites yourself, or products and servers or apps or whatever it may be. And so people use what's called cloud computing. And it doesn't actually mean that something's stored in the cloud. It just means that someone else is holding your servers and holding your data. And there's a lot of cost-saving factors that we can compare these to all day long. But high level, with the cloud, it's managed by somebody else. You don't have to have staff in place to manage those servers and infrastructure. It's entirely somebody else's problem. And so then that's why people use it, because they don't have to buy a server. It's expensive to buy a server. With the cloud, you start paying like $100 a month versus $1,500 right away. If you're looking at costs, this is kind of what the difference between the two. On-premise, you have your standard costs, but you have a whole bunch of costs that you're not really positive about until you start getting into it. With cloud computing, you know about 70% of what the cost is going to be month over month, which is essentially your subscription fee. When we compare cloud computing vendors, there's a lot out there, a ton. Google, Azure, and Amazon are probably the most popular. You'll see that usually Google is more affordable in some cases, depending on your resource needs and what you're trying to accomplish. Google also gives you a $300 credit to play around with, as well as servers that are free for life, like super small servers that aren't used for high bandwidth usage. As we talk about servers or our infrastructure, one of the things that startups like to do is make sure that they're on top of what's happening. So if a site goes down, that's detrimental to a startup because people aren't able to go to their website, people aren't accessing marketing material, or on the other side of the fence, the inside of the network, people that are working inside the building aren't able to accomplish the things they need because the services they need are down. So if you have on-premise or even off-premise or using cloud computing, there's three really great tools, Pingdom, Nagios, and Google Analytics that help monitor what we're doing with our infrastructure, as well as like how many people are using it, CPU usage, etc. So this is what Pingdom looks like. And we can put these up on our own websites. And this is in the base version's free, and I believe it checks every hour. So this way, you throw your website in, you'll get an alert if your website ever goes down. Or let's say, how many of us use online databases that sometimes aren't the most reliable and they go down, and then staff members call us or patrons will call us saying, hey, I can't get to the online database. Throw that online database in here as a monitor. And that way, when you know it goes down, you can instantly throw up a splash page on your website saying, hey, where the site's down, we're working with our vendors. And so this is a really great way to kind of improve customer service because now we can track things and monitor it without waiting to hear somebody else tell us it's down. Like we can get, the idea is to get in front of it with Pingdom. And these are usually for websites. So Pingdom's for websites, Nagios is for our internal servers and infrastructure. And they can monitor everything from network bandwidth, like how many people are on the network utilizing your speeds, to what a server, how much space a server has, to how much activity is going on a firewall. And it's a really robust tool, and it looks super scary and complicated. But if you just play with it, it's open source, so you can actually install it for free and play with these things. And then you can put up a monitoring dashboard. So now that one server that always goes down, or you continually get alerts that your file server is about to run out of space, you can install Nagios and they'll send out an alert saying, hey, you're about to run out of hard drive space. And then you can get in front of these problems before they occur. And again, it's a fantastic tool. Switching gears with Google Analytics, it's more for reporting. So we can find out how many people are accessing a website. What I really like about Google Analytics is excuse me, is we can break things down based off of demographics, age, gender, what kind of browser they're from, or what kind of browser they're using, what location are they from, are they using a phone, are they using a tablet, are they using a PC, are they using a laptop, what are their hobbies, which basically queries the cookies on their computer. So I can find out what kind of people are viewing my website. And so I utilize this all the time to monitor and understand who's using my website, why are they using my website, how are they getting there. And then from a coding angle, if I see most of my users are using, like, let's say Firefox, I will make sure that Firefox works perfectly on my website. And if I see no one's using Internet Explorer, then I wouldn't worry too much about ensuring Internet Explorer works on my website, or my website works on Internet Explorer, because my bulk users use XYZ browser. And then with Google Analytics, you can track how long people are on the website, what are they doing, what pages have they clicked, how long do they stay there till they left the website, and where do they leave to, depending on if that was a link through your website or not. And so again, great tools, and they implement relatively easily. The other thing that I always like to ask people about, or include in conversations, is how we track patron conversations and interactions. Startups do this really well, and they track everything through like a ticketing system almost. Any kind of customer issue, any kind of complaint, and they track it and they monitor it, and they use it for better understanding their community, as well as what problems are people having as a whole and how can we fix it. And then you can use this for internal usage as well. And so if somebody calls in because a website wasn't working, or they couldn't figure out how to check out that ebook, make a ticket for it. And then they get an email about, how you solved it. There's that special, like, wow, like, it feels good to get that ticket information, because that user can now glance at that and go, hey, I felt like the library helped me, I solved my problem. And there's three main ones: Freshdesk, which is free for up to 3 people. User response is another, and Zendesk is probably the most popular, and it costs about $5 per user account. And I'll show you Zendesk. So this is what Zendesk looks like. It looks kind of scary, but at the center of the screen is where you keep your ticket information or what happens. And then you can then put it in buckets or classify what it's called. So was this a circulation question? Was this a reference question? And then when it's time for reporting, you don't have to then start tallying things up. You can pull your ticket data, look at your buckets, and know exactly what people, like what kind of things that you did in your library. What did you do that year? What did you do that month? And where most of those issues, reference, circulation, what months. You can take it a step farther, and if you're getting a lot of questions on how to do X, Y, Z, then that should tell you as a business owner, we should write instructions then how to do that so people don't have to continually reach out to us. Let's give them the answers they need so they don't have to waste time asking. And so that's kind of how ticketing systems dovetails into our environments and our infrastructures. Thinking bigger when we communicate with our users. I mentioned this with Slack earlier. People can reach out to us through Facebook, text messaging, phone calls. If we have social media websites, including Facebook, like Twitter, LinkedIn, how do we track all that? That's a lot of conversation avenues. And unfortunately, the way we are in the world today, there's multiple ways to reach a single person. And so there should be a single way to be able to obtain all of those reach outs. And so Chatlio is one of them. It's a web app that you can then throw up on your website that lets people direct conversations to you. And that will then kind of help force conversation to go through one medium. Smooch, like I showed earlier, can actually connect to your Twitter, Facebook, text messaging, if you built your own messaging apps, and it will connect all that and put into a single channel for you to view. And so here's essentially what Chatlio looks like. On the right side is a little widget that appears on your website. How many of us go to websites now when they see like the little icon in the bottom right that says, yes, I can help you. And you can click on it and they will converse with you. It's huge. A lot of people aren't implementing that. And so we should do it as well because that's what people are used to seeing. And then here is essentially what Chatlio looks like as well. You have a little website interface. All these conversations get pushed into a single page, and that your entire library can then view. And so we can see all the conversations that are taking place. We can see all the answers that are occurring. Other staff members can jump in and have conversations if need be. So there's a lot of other really great resources that are out there that startups use to either find funding, to build networking, to work together. From a funding and job opportunity angle, angel.co is a really neat website. Not only does it let you find jobs to work for startups, so if somebody's looking for a job, direct them to Angel Co. If someone's looking to hire somebody, direct them to Angel Co. On the other side of the fence, there's investor opportunities. So people would put their startup information on there, and investors would look at it as a portfolio and decide who they want to invest in. LinkedIn is a really important tool to understand and leverage, especially as librarians, because I think we miss the mark sometimes on leveraging our network. We all know someone, and so to utilize who we know is important, especially in the startup world, because that's how you grow, that's how you get into where you need to get into. So leverage that with our patrons. Let's find out what they do and who they work with and who they know, and leverage that to better ourselves. So if we're trying to solve a problem, let's find out which patrons can help us solve those problems and implement. Put a think tank together, a group of people or a user group, and have everyone come in and help solve it. We talk about Kickstarter and Indiegogo. I think a lot of people assume that's what startups do, is they just build a Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and that's where they get their money. It's not necessarily true. Usually what will occur is you need to have a good pool of money to begin with, which will then help you build your Kickstarter page, create the videos, the graphics you need. Most of the time, startup companies will use Kickstarter and Indiegogo to market test, to find out, hey, do we have a product that people like, and can we drive up pre-orders? And then they'll use that money to build the manufacturing or to launch it, or even start the prototyping phase. But usually that company exists already, and they use that to kind of get moving, not to find the funding they need to operate. if that makes sense. SeedVest, WeFunder, and others also are really great opportunities for people to find funding for ideas or companies or investment opportunities. There's also some really great co-working spaces. And I think this is probably one of the most important slides today. People pay money to use shared office spaces. Like people pay anywhere from 10 to 50 bucks a month to go to what's called a co-working space or a shared workspace, to have a desk, bring their laptop, hook up to the internet, and work. At the same time, these spaces will also, depending on their fee structure, will offer meeting rooms or small conference rooms that people can then have a meeting in or invite investors in or whatnot and have a conversation. Other times they'll offer food and snacks for the users. Coffee usually all day, and water all day is usually the standard. There's at least that, but occasionally there's food and snacks around as well. We do that already as libraries. Some of us have coffee machines. Some of us have water coolers out. We already offer wireless access. Some of us have meeting rooms already in place, or study rooms, depending on how you want to what you want to call it. And so we do these things, and we do these things for free. And so I think it's important to advertise that. And so to leverage that. But at the same time, people use these spaces to also interact with other startups and meet other people. So I was once in Canada. I visited the social working hub. It's called the Center for Innovation and Social Improvement or something like that. And the idea was that everyone that worked there was trying to fix a social problem. And so you had lawyers there, like building an ethical company to help solve some type of issue. And so people would leverage each other. So if there was a group of people trying to understand some legal documents, they would go over to the company that had lawyers in it, and they would ask questions. And you built this really neat ecosystem of sharing problems and ideas and conversations. I think that's something, as a library, we need to figure out how to tap into and mimic and do ourselves, because I think we're not doing that well enough. And if we can mimic that environment and say, hey, from this hour to this hour, we'll have snacks for startup companies. If you're building your company, come into our library. It's free already, and you can meet other entrepreneurs. And so this is essentially what it looks like, a co-working space. And if you think about it, this is looking like kind of what our maker spaces are looking like now. When we talk about, or our new library spaces, open seating areas, fun colors. Here's what like study rooms will look like. And the slide got moved for some reason. So when you talk about funding as a whole, usually from a startup world, they talk about getting their funding from an idea phase. They invest their own money up to about 15 grand. And they ask friends, family, and fools, depending on how you call it, for that initial capital. Then they go into seed round, where basically you buy like a bank note, and then Series A funding, and eventually the big goal is to then do an IPO. But that's essentially the trajectory of where funding comes from and how they work. But everyone always starts with themselves, their co-founders, and their family and friends. And so to leverage that and understand how that relationship works is kind of important. So I know I covered like a whole wide gamut of things across multiple topics. Are there any questions or conversations you want to have, or things you want to dive in deeper, or apps you want to see?
Thanks so much, Brian. I haven't seen any questions come in yet, but we've got plenty of time. So just a shout out to everyone that if you've got questions, go ahead and type those in now. But I have a question for you, Brian. You obviously are very enthusiastic about technology, and you use technology a lot. And I imagine those of us who are attending today are also very comfortable with technology and trying new things. What do you suggest, like if a library starts using some of these new resources, how do you get other people on board that may not be so enthusiastic about technology per se?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I always tell people to start small. Never push out a new product or new tech. Say, hey everyone, we're using Slack today. Everyone create an account, because the people that aren't really liking new stuff will just instantly shut down. So start with a small group of people that are highly motivated, like they're the ringleaders of your library. They get everyone to kind of corral behind them and show them the tool, show them the features of it, get them excited about it. And I use this phrase a lot, call it a pilot program. And then say, hey, we need some beta users or some beta testers to see, will this work for our library? Or can we use this as a tool? And then get people excited about it that way, because it's a lot more exciting trying something than being told to use something. So that's one thing to do. The other one is if you have like a big naysayer, have them involved in choosing a product. So there's usually competitors for every tool that's out there. So present the list and say, hey, we're trying to solve this problem, and we have these tools to help us solve the problem. What tool do you think will work the best? And then work together as a group to find out that answer. And if you steer the conversation correctly, you can steer it towards the tool you picked. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Those are great suggestions. Thanks. I've got a question. I don't know if you see the question that came in. This may be a question for the group, but if you have any, do you see it there?
Yeah, so the question is, are most library meeting study spaces reserved free of charge, whether it's for a nonprofit person reserving or purpose or for commercial use? When would charging come into play? So it varies. So I've been in libraries where it was free. I've only been I think I've only been in one library where you had to pay like $15. It was like a resource fee for markers. For a study space or a meeting space. But at least in my experience, the majority is free. Like you come in, is the room open? Yes. Can I have it? Yes. And then I'm in the room. But I'm not sure if that's the same for everyone else.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that. It really goes back to your library's policy. I mean, each library kind of treats their meeting space differently. So, there are some that have kind of a priority list that obviously, the rooms are for the library activities first, and then for community members, and then nonprofits, and then for-profits. And I'm not saying all libraries do this, but some do. And so some may say that it's free for library card holders and local businesses and nonprofits, but then for commercial purposes, they may charge a fee. But, I also know there's been some discussion that libraries are dropping those fees just to make the meeting space more open to all, as a community center. So that's really a discussion to have, with your library. I know the person who asked that question, I don't know if that helped or if there's anything we can follow up on, please let us know. Or please feel free to email me later. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions, Brian. Do you have any parting thoughts before we wrap up?
Words of wisdom.
Yeah.
I guess the one thing is if anything looked interesting to you, you can just, most of the time there's free trials as well. Download it, play with it. Make sure that you utilize the free trial to its fullest. So don't like do the trial this weekend because next week is Thanksgiving weekend. So plan it when you think you're going to have free time, get the trial, play with it, and then determine if it's something that you want to implement. And usually, if you need to ask like board approval or director approval afterwards, email the person that gave you the trial or the company and say, hey, I tried this for myself. I want to present it to my board, my organization. Can you extend it? Like 8 out of 10 times, they'll be like, yeah, here's another week or month even. So just ask.
All right. Sounds good. I think I'm going to check out Typeform. That looked really cool.
Yeah, it's fun. And they give some substantial discounts for like educators and stuff too.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Brian, for your time and sharing all those great ideas. They look like a lot of fun. And thank you all who attended today. Brian did give us permission to record, so I'll process that and post that with the slides on the Rails website, and I'll send an email when that's ready. So everybody enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks again, Brian.
Yep, thank you. And if you have questions as well, feel free to email me. Thanks.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.